Hello, BookTube. Welcome to Meyer's Mega Fictional Musings. I'm Travis. So, every so often, an author, perhaps this is the same for you, every so often you come across an author and you kind of resolve to read everything from that person. That happened about 10 years ago for me with David Foster Wallace, and it's happening again now with William Gass. As I joined this kind of online community and started the channel, I had resolutely decided to read The Tunnel as my first video review. So Middle C should it be considered right up there with The Tunnel? Absolutely. Would it have been as good as that massive tome is if it was longer? Maybe. Who knows? Who really cares? Because this is just your average size novel, but it is absolutely William Gass. The same sort of writing that's in The Tunnel, the beautiful writing that we all know and love. So yeah, now I know he's written many short stories and essays, and he does literary criticism, and he's been very prolific. Was very prolific, I should say. Rest in peace to William Gass, but he's only done 3 novels, and I shouldn't say only because I realize how long novels can take to write, and it sounds like the Tunnel it took him about 26 years or so to write, which means there is almost 50 years between Omen Setter's Luck, which sounds like I'm going to save for last out of his novels, and this one, Middle C. So about 50 years, which means he wrote Middle C when he was well into his 80s, at least parts of it, and my gosh, I find that absolutely incredible. Yeah, so here's just a true artist. Like, I think a man that was put on this earth to create this searing fiction for everyone to enjoy, I think. And obviously share his beautiful mind in terms of, the criticism part of it and his essays. So, it was an absolutely incredible novel, it goes without saying. And I don't think at this point there can be any doubt as to the genius of William Gass. I'm not the only superfan around here in this community. And I think we can all agree his prose is nothing short of majestic. And again, it focuses on these beautiful metaphors and figurative language he uses, which are either visceral, poignant, thought-provoking, or clever, or anywhere in between. Take your pick. It's just amazing stuff. Now, structurally, it is much more straightforward than The Tunnel. There are 395 pages, 45 chapters, varying quite nicely in length. And this story shares some very noticeable parallels with his magnum opus, The Tunnel. We have a professor protagonist who is extremely bitter and resentful. Well, maybe I jumped the gun on extremely there, but for different reasons in Middle C, he's bitter and resentful, but again, we go deep into the psyche of our narrator, including sections from his adolescence, and we also have some references to writing. In this case, there's not as much as The Tunnel. I think he is trying to write our narrator, or at least record things, which I'll talk about in a sec. But it was very cool. One of the best parts of the book, honestly, is throughout, Joseph Skizzen, our narrator, is trying to construct and most effectively articulate this one idea, this one sentence in the book. So I'm going to touch on it a little bit later, but that was really cool, and Gass actually bolds his playing with this sentence throughout the book. Now, as I said, our narrator is Joseph Skizzen. Sometimes as a youth, then, as a young man sort of finding his way, and finally he becomes a professor of music. This is not going to spoil anything for you, honestly. We learn that his father pretended to be Jewish and sort of whisked his family out of their birthplace, small town in Austria. And he takes them away to London, and he gives them new identities. He finds new identities and names for them, and they pretend to be Jewish, okay? And they end up surviving the end of the war and V2 bombings, right? It's not like Gravity's Rainbow. But so his father does this. Now, eventually, Joseph and his mother and Joseph's older sister are able to get passage to America, kind of thinking that's perhaps where they don't know, but where his father may have gone. And they hold out some hope that he will find them, or vice versa, right? So Skizen's mother longs for her Austrian home, or roots. She slowly loses hope that she will never see her husband again, as does Joseph, I think. And we learn that he had made some money gambling before he sort of took off. So there's this mystery about what's going on with his dad. So she is forced to start this new life with these two kids in small town Ohio, is where they make their way to. Now his sister ends up integrating herself and adjusting to her new surroundings much more effectively than Joey, or his mother do. She marries into a wealthy family and has a kid. But so they have really no identity. It's fascinating, and Joseph Skizen outlines this throughout the book, his lack of, among other things, a sense of identity. I'm just going to read this one part here. I forgot the book today. I had to get back to the library, but here's the quote, you guys. Many of his colleagues, and this is when he's a professor, many of his colleagues had seen a travelogue about the turn of the century Vienna at the local cinema and began to ask Joseph about it. Where a certain square was relative to his lodgings, had he sat in the pews of the cathedral, whether he had known this man about town or another, had he ridden the Ferris wheel that had been erected in the Prater, or enjoyed a Sacher Torte at the Sacher Hotel, and of what exactly was such a cake made. These questions had quite unnerved him. He said, truthfully, that he was too disturbed by the past to discuss its leaner features. Since that moment of emergency, heavens, it was some years ago, Professor Skizen had taken care to read up on the period of his residency. Now he knew all the names of Vienna's points of interest, and a bit of the bios of its main men, and of what a Sacher Torte is made, chocolate cake and marmalade. As the 30s there drew on, which meant the deepening of his civic reading, he felt he could occasionally catch something of what his father had said he smelled, the aggressive odor emitted by an increasingly fragile smugness, in some rudeness heated to the degree called brutality. It is great stuff. So he was very young when he left Vienna, but it sounds like he has some memories. And we get a sense his father was ashamed of being Austrian and the types of people that were prosecuting others, I guess, is the only way to put it. Now, it's fabulous narration, as you might come to expect. So, now, he becomes a professor of music, you guys. Oh, and the narrative goes back and forth a little bit, it's great. But we're first introduced to Joseph Skizen as a professor who is in his attic, and he has created his own inhumanity museum over the years. So he has become obsessed and sort of fascinated by the dark side of human nature and human history, much similar to William Frederick Kohler. But he catalogs and seeks out like articles or headlines or pictures, whatever he can find, that document basically all of the worst things that humanity has done in recorded time, just whatever he can get. And this would include anything, genocide, just racism, murder, you name it. So I mentioned, again, one of the most fascinating parts of the book is Skizen's commitment to crafting this one particular idea he wants to get across, which he's constantly analyzing and changing and like fine-tuning. And as I said, Gass bolds the text for us, and I was going to show you, but I forgot the book. It starts out simple and slow, but the idea is this. I'm going to try and articulate. It's simple. What he thinks and what he believes is that initially he feared that the human race would be exterminated or die off, but now the new fear is that it will actually survive. So Joseph Skizen has a very pessimistic view on the human species, and like I said in the tunnel, he makes it very difficult for us to look away. But anyway, he nitpicks about every little word and how to express this thought. And it slowly becomes lengthier and more elaborate. And it's amazing writing. Like, it's truly, truly fascinating. Towards the end, he finally comes up with the solution or the sentence that works, and it just goes back to the simplest form, one little sentence. It's great. So like William Frederick Kohler, Skizzen is a very reflective person, but like paranoid and very pessimistic, but not all the time. Now, I'll get to that in a sec, but his life and family have seen constant upheaval, right, and hardship. So consequently, we we feel a bit of sympathy for Joseph Skizzen. At least I did. Now, he has absolutely no sense of self, as I mentioned, figuratively and literally, because he has no documents or papers. He wants to go to college. He wants to get some work in Ohio, and they're just handcuffed. They can't really do anything. He ends up actually being somewhat resourceful, pretty resourceful, and is able to forge some documents. But so throughout the book, he feels like conspicuous or like an imposter, and he's being targeted or blamed for things, or just simply not good enough. Now, it's so severe that for him sometimes that he invents personal histories from his past in order to, like, I guess, simply have something to offer people in conversation. Okay, so he just he invents these little histories. It's like there's this shadow of elusive shame always looming over him. And I just want to read a small little part here of the inventing of the histories. Well, I did actually. Sorry, that was that last little bit I read there about. He's talking about he reads up on Vienna so he can become acquainted with it to tell people things, even though he has no memory. It's interesting, for sure. So if you watch my video in the tunnel, or if you're starting to think about Gas and his characterization as maybe too depressing or bleak or, dark, fear not, although it is, but Skizzen is a much more admirable character than the monster, William Frederick Kohler. If for any reason, because he shows a degree of resilience, or at least persistence throughout this book. I mentioned that he has no sense of identity or self, but he grows. And in this book, he doesn't do anything despicable or harmful, like, for example, seduce his students or cheat on his wife or slander his colleagues or think about strangling an infant, for example. But in fact, the worst thing he does in this book is, and he tells us this, he's aware of this, he steals some seeds so that his mother can plant them in her garden that she loves. And that's the worst thing he does. So I know one of the reviews in the front of the book called this a Bildungsroman, and while he does have faults, our narrator, like I said, like all of us, there are peaks and valleys. And again, I found myself just totally wishing the best for him. When he gets to Ohio, he searches for work. He receives meager wages from jobs that he rather enjoys, like working in a library, and he works in a music store first. And he does take some risks, and he evolves throughout the course of this book. And I had another couple of passages I wanted to read to you, but I don't have the book, like I said, which is heartbreaking for me. But like I mentioned before, he's very self-aware, much like Kohler, and he acknowledges these insufficiencies he has, which makes him endearing, I think. He knows he's not as musically gifted as perhaps some people might believe, considering he forged documents to apply for this job. Anyway, now, he knows he can be selfish and inept sometimes, but can't we all? And he tells us the ways because he's so self-aware. And like all of us, he goes through peaks and valleys and moments of confidence, moments of fear. And so there's the one quote I just loved that I wish I would have written it down, but he's just arriving in this town where he's going to be going to college, and he talks about looking out the window and like seizing the opportunities that are presented to him, and he's positive and he's optimistic, and it reads like a coming of age story, no doubt. And I found myself actually, just for a second, I thought of Look Homeward Angel by Thomas Wolfe, which I read about 6 years ago, and I loved it. It's a beautiful book. But then I thought right away, it doesn't even compare. I'm just thinking of the type of reader I am now, And there's no comparison. This would be considered a coming of age story, and it's just executed so much more effectively. And again, that's not anything against the book that I love, Look Homeward Angel. But anywho, I loved reading. I loved reading about characters that like come of age and they grow and they learn and you're there with them. So there's elements of that in Middle C for sure. Yeah. So also, just like The Tunnel, I enjoy how the narration is sometimes from the perspective, well, not the perspective, but it's when Kohler or Skizzen is lecturing to his students who always just seem disengaged and inept. But it's like he's almost thinking out loud. And those are just great, great parts. There's a beautiful bit where, and again, I wish I could read it, but he starts going off on a bit of a tangent about like Shostakovich and Bartok and all these composers. And then he kind of goes off on a side tangent, which isn't a digression like some postmodern work, but it fits in with the plot perfectly. But he goes off on a digression where he talks about war and, the fact that people were, drafted and all these things. And it was really, really good. And again, I wish I had the section for you. Now, the book does have classical music components in it. And not surprisingly, Gass made me very interested and engaged with something that I have no knowledge or really interest in. Again, classical music, but it was fabulous stuff, for sure. Now, the book's ending also, which again I won't spoil, very satisfying, at least for me personally. And I'm not going to give anything away, although you can't in this book with this author. A lot of resolution and redemption. Now, some musings. I finished this book in a little over a week, which for me, you guys, is lightning fast. But I was going slow, like I wanted to savor this book. Again, I loved it as soon as I jumped in. I would have that, it's awe-inspiring work, so I would have that look in my face where it just takes some moments to appreciate the language, the metaphors he uses, and it makes you think. It's hard-hitting, it's moving, beautiful writing. Now, so I would pause to do that, but I just couldn't believe I ended up finishing it in a little over a week. So I would cast aside any TBR piles to read more Gass this year. Who knows if I will, but so profound moments, highly descriptive moments, witty, smart, funny. Again, he's notoriously dark writer, and he very much is, but there are funnier parts in Middle C than The Tunnel, for sure. Again, the only frustrations I get is just deciding on which parts from the book I want to read. And actually, there's another one here I'm going to read. I just realized. So when he gets to Ohio, you guys, he ends up, again, forging documents, and he purchases for very, very cheap this very decrepit car. And this is, again, they haven't been in America very long. Check out this part. It says, "The scrap in the scrapyard was scrappier than he remembered. The large piles of metal were now small and ate slowly at one another like couples in a lengthy marriage. There were still a few gatherings of running boards, bumpers, and grills, as well as melted cardboard boxes from which spilled wipers, hinges, and latches. What a desolate place, Joey and Joseph thought. Unlike buildings after bombs, these remains had no dynamics. Inertia was their god." Gorgeous, gorgeous. And I could kind of picture this scrapyard, and it's awesome. And then, it's interesting how he calls himself Joey and Joseph. Here's where this coming of age kind of happens, I think, is he was known as a kid. I think when he was young, he was called Joey by his family or whatever, classmates, Joey. He's becoming Joseph now. He is starting a new life in America. So his identity is shifting. It's being discovered, and it's fabulous, fabulous stuff. So just a couple more things here, guys, before I let you go. It's an incredible novel. There's no doubt this is an instant top 10 favorite. Lots of mono nowhere, though. I've talked about mono nowhere in the past, and I loved it so much reading, and I just didn't want it to be over either. I want to buy this book someday for sure. I hope to have all of William Gass's work, no doubt. I was going into work each day earlier and earlier to read, and I was all in right from the beginning. An absolute joy to read. So with my nerdiness, I would put it in the top 10 all-time book for me. Now, as good as The Tunnel, maybe not quite, just because of the length, I guess. I love big books, but it's right up there. Now, better than Novel Explosives, even better a little bit than A Naked Singularity, which was self-published, right? I can't believe that. But yeah, so, by the way, if you are watching this and don't know about the cult of the cactus boots yet, I'll post, well, I don't think he has a YouTube channel, but on Instagram with coronasamas.press, a very exciting new project from one of the Bookstagram people I follow. Awesome stuff. So now I'll post some information about that in the description box, you guys. But he, in a recent post on Instagram, actually talked about how, and it was fascinating, just what is and really connected with this, what is the function of reading for people? What is your purpose for reading? What is its function? How does it serve you? Now, for me, why I read this challenging, I guess, metafiction, okay? I've always been a reader. But again, my whole experience was transformed when I found my way onto this online community with Twitter first, and then Bookstagram and YouTube. And when I'm not reading, I'm often thinking about, when I'm not playing with my kids or spending time with my family, I'm thinking about reading, or I'm reading about reading, or jumping online and engaging. And scrolling through posts, interacting with many people, everyone who feels the same way I do about literature and just so passionate about it, right? And I think in life, when passion can be shared, there are few things more beautiful and just more enjoyable. For example, like just this morning, picked up some Tim Hortons coffee. It's roll up the rim season. Hopefully I'll win a car or something. Just the guy that, just real quick, these human interactions with strangers, I think, are important. So, yeah, he just had some tattoos, and I'm like, oh, love your tattoo, man. I'm just getting my coffee in the drive-thru, and he sees mine, he says, oh, great, yeah, cool, what's that? Is that your family? I'm like, yeah, and it was just a really quick exchange, maybe 10 seconds. But there was something like, really pure and simple and beautiful about it. I don't know. I like that sort of stuff, so, yeah. And lately I've been able to interact with the community. In fact, I've even met with a few people, and we've just chatted about books. It was awesome. So this has greatly increased my enjoyment of life. Absolutely. So, yeah. Now, while I prefer to read physical books, technology has allowed us to always we have a device, and we can read on our phones, which is nice too. So I've just found that it's really, positively impacted my life, and I'm using it as an avenue to try and connect with people, which is great. So that's how I thrive anyway, and I think how many people thrive is human connection. So this has helped, and it sounds like this new novel, The Cactus Boots, is intriguing, and it's maybe about that sort of very thing, as I understand it, which I don't understand much about it, but it's all very mysterious, but very exciting. So yeah, hope you guys are doing well. You guys got to read Middle C. It's a masterpiece. I hope you enjoyed this review. Hope I didn't give anything away for you, right? So you guys have a great day. Love y'all.